to enhance its ability to deal effectively with external threats. Among the changes affected was the creation of a Directorate General of Security. This comprised the Aviation Research Center, or the ARC, the Indo-Tibetan Border Force, the ITBP, and the Special Security of the Border Force. The ARC, along with an aviation wing, was to function as a highly sophisticated technical intelligence unit. The ITBP was to act as sentinels on the Sino-Indian border and comprised both a political and a security component. The SSB was to be a stay-behind organization. What was not publicly acknowledged at the time was an extremely secretive body intended to carry out special operations across the border in Tibet. Notwithstanding this, following the Indo-Pak War of 1965, and despite this time competent intelligence provided by the IB, the clamor for bifurcating the external and internal functions reached a crescendo. This coincided with the period when the general perception worldwide was to have separate organizations for external and internal intelligence functions. The explanation for this was that the basic requirements, including the nature of personnel for these agencies, differed. Also that all modern democratic nations had separate external and internal intelligence agencies. In 1968, therefore, the government conceded the demand for two separate agencies, and the Intelligence Bureau split into the Intelligence Bureau for Domestic and Border Intelligence and the Research and Analysis Wing intended to deal exclusively with foreign intelligence. The R&AW incorporated the Directorate General of Security setup and also included the External Intelligence Wing of the IB. The real benefit of establishing a separate agency lay in the changed mindset as far as intelligence work was concerned. This included a clear recognition that a modern state required a state-of-the-art external intelligence agency constantly striving to improve its technical and innovative skills to handle 21st century threats. In the first decade of the 21st century, India's intelligence services underwent a major overhaul. It involved as a first step the setting up of a 5-member National Security Council headed by the Prime Minister. Another key step was the establishment of the post of a National Security Advisor, who was to function from within the Prime Minister's office to coordinate all aspects of internal and external security, foreign policy and intelligence, as also space and nuclear-related matters. A National Security Council Secretariat was also set up under the National Security Council. A National Security Advisory Board comprising academics and experts in various fields and including former civil and military officials was also established. A multi-agency center to coordinate every piece of relevant intelligence and information gathered by a multitude of intelligence and security agencies was also constituted. This had subordinate wings in the different states so as to extend the reach of the multi-agency center, and into which all agencies operating at the state level were represented. A nuclear command authority was also set up to deal with overall policy coordination of nuclear-related issues. This was because by then India had become an established nuclear power. A national technical research organization modeled on the lines of the National Security Agency of the United States and the GCHQ of the UK has also been created. A number of refinements to improve intelligence collection and assessment were also introduced at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, I now come to the challenges which face India's intelligence agencies. Unlike the intelligence agencies of the United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, China, and many European powers, as I pointed out earlier, India's intelligence agencies do not have global ambitions. Their focus is essentially on the region and on internal security issues. As I said at the very beginning, India's strategic environment is overshadowed by the India-China rivalry at one level and India-Pakistan tensions on the other, even as there are constant threats from state, non-state and sub-state actors. Other dangers posed by fundamentalist, extremist and radical forces, concerns about sectarian conflicts of the kind that have engulfed many parts of West Asia, Afghanistan and Pakistan, concerns about the impact of the turmoil in Bangladesh and of problems in Sri Lanka, Myanmar and Indonesia, etc. Consequently, India's intelligence agencies have a very wide canvas to cover. Currently, in the case of China, I would like to underline or underscore the fact that peace is maintained by adopting a calibrated response to intended or unintended provocations. The intelligence backup is highly critical in this regard. India is not unaware of the fact that perhaps the 1962 conflict with China could or might have been the result of a misreading of China's intentions. Currently, therefore, intelligence agencies see as their main task making sense of China's growing military capabilities, including what its end objective might be. What does this multi-billion-dollar defense budget mean? And how to make sense of the frenetic pace at which China is upgrading its weapons, its missile and nuclear systems, and the emphasis being put on the Navy. This morning, I paid a lot of attention to a brief presentation was given on the maritime Silk Route. But I listened with a great deal of attention because it is fundamentally important for India's intelligence agencies to appreciate the true import of President Xi's maritime Silk Route, which employs an ancient metaphor, and whether it masks aggressive Chinese ambitions to establish a dominant Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean. I'm hoping that the study will throw up some answers to this question, for intelligence agencies have a vital sort of interest in the outcome. There are also concerns today of China's ambivalence regarding its no first use doctrine and on the China-Pakistan nexus in nuclear matters. This is again an area which calls for a great deal of calibration, for erroneous estimates could have grave consequences, not only for our two nations, but for the region as a whole. This becomes even more complex in the case of Pakistan. For Pakistan often exhibits a penchant for creating situations that can lead to an all-out conflict. Intelligence agencies have of necessity to provide specific and detailed intelligence as to the extent to which Pakistan's aggressive actions are indeed a prelude to an all-out war. It requires of the intelligence agencies a proper reading and understanding of the thinking that prevails in the highest levels of the Pakistani military and its high command, apart from the government. Given that the thrust of Pakistan's military policies are essentially India-centric, accompanied by deep-rooted feelings of insecurity and hostility towards India, Pakistan's intentions hold the key to peace or war. This is particularly true of the missile and nuclear aspects, because these remain highly opaque. And for most of us who have been in the world of intelligence, this is often like a riddle wrapped in an enigma. Consequently, the most important and threatening part of this is that we need an intelligence watch of the very highest order. India is a little more at peace when it comes to our internal security issues. The long-standing militancies in Jammu and Kashmir and the northeast have been on the intelligence watch for a long time. Over the years, intelligence agencies have been able to develop reasonably good insights into the nature of the overt and covert militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. Perhaps a little less so when the conflict is between ethnic nationalism and mainstream nationalism in the northeast. But both are, in a sense, within, I would say, the proper range of India's intelligence agencies. Things are a little more difficult when it comes to Maoism and terrorism today. Both of them represent, I think, or constitute the defining security threats that our country faces at this moment. We need to be able to assess clearly where exactly Maoism and terrorism are headed. One is a movement which is essentially indigenous, has not too many external relationships, and the other one is part of the worldwide jihadi terrorist phenomenon. The latter is a hydra-headed phenomenon, but Maoism is also a danger because it affects both the intellectual as well as the coercive apparatus of the state. We have therefore been able to task our intelligence agencies in a manner that you adopt different tactics towards one. One is an indigenous phenomena. It cannot be dealt with by using military tactics. The other one requires far more difficult and far more different tactics. One of the worries that Indian intelligence agencies constantly face is the possibility of another attack on the model of the November 26, 2008 attack, sponsored by Pakistan's ISI and employing highly trained non-state and sub-state actors. Concerns exist that there may be other David Hadleys acting on behalf of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, exploiting India's freedom of opportunity to carry out another such attack in a different locale and possibly with even more disastrous consequences. Anticipation and vigil would hardly be enough. It requires deep penetration of appropriate levels of terrorist high command located in Pakistan to be able to detect and defeat another potential attack of the 2611 variety. Indian intelligence agencies also play a vital role in matters such as cybersecurity. They are closely involved in maritime security matters, including protection of the sea lanes of communication and to combat piracy. In conjunction with the Atomic Energy Establishment, India's intelligence agencies are also involved in keeping track of chemical, biological, and radiological dangers and threats. I now come to our human intelligence and technical intelligence capabilities. Ever since spying, or to use a more sophisticated term, intelligence began, intelligence organizations have depended on both human and innovative applications of technology or techint to achieve their objective of intelligence collection. Today, technology has a major impact on the way intelligence is collected and processed. As the 21st century progresses, this is bound to increase in geometrical progression. Talking first about human intelligence, there are any number of outstanding instances where our intelligence agencies have infiltrated or penetrated target institutions. In the case of foreign targets, this involves their military installations and government departments. For instance, during the 1965 and 1971 wars with Pakistan, India's intelligence agencies had carried out some excellent penetrations. In 1965, this enabled the Intelligence Bureau to have a good idea of what Pakistan was up to in the Run of Kutch, and an even better idea of the preparations for Operation Gibraltar, that is the infiltration by Pakistani forces in the garb of irregulars into Jammu and Kashmir, and Operation Grand Slam, aimed at cutting the overland route to Kashmir and thus prevent India from bringing in tanks into Kashmir. Intelligence provided at that time contributed materially to Pakistan's conspicuous failure in their attempts to provoke an insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir and to its eventual defeat when the battle was joined further south across Punjab and Rajasthan. In 1971, intelligence played an even more critical role, especially with regard to preparing the Mukti Bahini for action inside the then East Bengal. Indian intelligence also played a major part in blunting Pakistan's actions in the western and eastern sector. Indian intelligence agencies have also met with conspicuous success in numerous counterintelligence and counter-terrorist operations. Many of these are documented and form part of intelligence folklore. The Kashmir Princess case, the Kumar Narayanan case, the Weatherby affair, the case of the Pakistani military attaché in Delhi, and the Rabinder Singh case are some of the better known ones. There have been many more successes in counter-terrorism operations, but these are too numerous to repeat here. One of the better known counter-terrorism operations was Operation Black Thunder in 1988, which resulted in the surrender of 180 Sikh terrorists who had taken refuge inside the Golden Temple in Amritsar. There have no doubt been many failures and perceived failures as well. Some, with the benefit of hindsight, could have been avoided. These include the assassination of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in October 1984 by her own security detail, and the assassination of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in May 1991 by an LTTE suicide squad, following an apparent downgrading of the threat perception since he demitted office. There are other conspicuous instances where intelligence agencies could not give advance information of terrorist attacks, such as the attack on the Indian Parliament in December 2001 by a Pakistani terrorist detail, and the ISI-LET-sponsored attack on multiple targets in Mumbai on the 26th of November 2008. At times, there have been warnings where signals are not heeded, sometimes by the agencies themselves and sometimes by policymakers. During 1984, the armed forces disregarded specific intelligence provided about the presence of sharpshooters on the ramparts of the Golden Temple, which led to unnecessary casualties when paratroopers tried to parachute into the Golden Temple. Again in the mid-80s, Western intelligence agencies had some information about simultaneous mid-air explosions being attempted by Sikh terrorists aboard Air India flights emanating from Toronto and Tokyo, respectively. Air India's Kanishka flight, flying out of Toronto, exploded off the Irish coast, killing nearly 400 persons. The flight from Tokyo escaped disaster only due to fortuitous circumstances. Still earlier, during the Indo-Pak War of 1965, the Indian Army disregarded specific intelligence about the Ichogil Canal, which impeded movement of Indian tanks and possibly prevented the capture of Lahore. Coming to technical intelligence, today almost every country in the world has highly specialized standalone technical agencies which provide overarching intelligence of a very sophisticated nature. This is in addition to technical intelligence collected by individual intelligence agencies themselves. Among the best-known technical intelligence agencies today are the National Security Agency of the United States and the GCHQ of the UK. India now has its own National Technical Research Organization, which was set up at the turn of the century in the wake of the Kargil conflict in 1999. Where the NSA and the GCHQ score over technical agencies like the NTRO is in the development of sophisticated interception systems and systems for bulk intercept and analysis of international telecommunications. Another major area of technical prowess of the NSA and GCHQ has been in the development of various forms of overhead surveillance and imagery, the U-2 spy planes, the satellite surveillance systems, and the like, in which areas India's capacity is limited as of now. These also involve close collaboration between technical intelligence agencies and defense manufacturers. By far, the biggest technology game changer has been the Internet. With the Internet, information has become much more dynamic, more interactive, and more abundant, and also ubiquitously accessible. This arguably represents a fundamental change as far as intelligence and intelligence gathering are concerned. Agencies today are confronted by a tsunami of information and data that exists on modern ICT networks. To obtain nuggets of intelligence information from this pile of information is like looking for needles in a stack of needles. Among the more valuable items of interest to technical intelligence today is the so-called metadata, which provide clues to existing patterns of behavior and action, and the electronic exhaust, the indelible trail left by all individuals in the modern world as they perform a range of digital transactions. Remarkable results are possible through employing such techniques, as was seen in the case of the aborted attempt on the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in Mumbai in 2008 by a team of elite operatives. The problem is that despite the advances made, the huge accumulation of data available exceeds the capacity of intelligence agencies to analyze. A major impact of ICT for intelligence agencies has been in supplanting human intelligence with cyber intelligence. This is further translated into cyber espionage through covert penetrations of networks of target organizations to produce intelligence on a continuing basis. From this, it is but a short step to cyber sabotage, which is already being practiced by some state-sponsored intelligence agency. Potentially, this could move thereafter to cyber warfare. One documented example of cyber sabotage is the insertion of the Stuxnet worm into the computer networks of Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment centrifuge system, causing the centrifuges to spin at excessive speeds, leading to its destruction. Likewise, the Shamoon virus wiped out memories of 30,000 computers of the Saudi Aramco Oil Corporation. There have been several other attacks, especially in the West, on financial and banking systems, leading to large-scale destruction. Let me now talk about the perception of intelligence after having said all this. I would say that intelligence has, more often than not, been the butt of sustained criticism and attack, much of it in the nature of uninformed criticism. Part of it is also due to a growing inability, both of policymakers and those in the public domain, including the media, to situate any significant development within a wider context. Such criticism is not confined to just one or two countries. All democracies have come under severe criticism whenever a major incident or event with adverse consequences has taken place. September 11, 2001 resulted in widespread criticism of US intelligence agencies for their failure to anticipate the attack. The term joining the dots was much used in the context of 9/11, and the same was mentioned in the case of our 26/11 on November 26th, especially by those least informed, as if complex events can somehow be reduced to a kind of predictable simplicity. The reality is that intelligence communities the world over face a new and different challenge, namely, to effect a transition from a strategic landscape to one dominated by transnational threats, especially global terrorism. Jihadi terrorism, which operates on a global scale, has taken on many of the attributes of transnational conflicts of earlier periods and acquired many of the same characteristics, but is yet very different. Hence, intelligence methodologies to deal with these kinds of new situations often lack the kind of nimbleness expected. Dealing with homegrown extremists again requires a different approach. Less of military methods, as I said in the case of the Naxalites, and more reliance on exigencies to deal with rapidly unfolding situations. All this translates into a kind of existential problem that nations and societies face today. September 11, 2001 in the United States and November 26, 2008 in India have definitely ushered in a new era of threats and introduced to the world a different kind of scenario. Both incidents were about achieving mass casualties and large-scale economic destruction. Terrorists in both instances had no disposition to negotiate. In the case of the September 11, 2001 attack in the US, the ultimate command and control was in Afghanistan. Attackers came from a variety of Arab states. Germany was used as the mustering point, and preparations for the attack took place in the United States. In the case of November 26, 2008 in India, the ultimate command and control was in Pakistan. The perpetrators and the handlers were all Pakistanis. Those involved had been carefully selected and trained by Pakistan's ISI and were prepared to commit suicide and had the benefit of detailed planning and identification of targets carried out by a US citizen months before the actual attack. The Pakistani attackers employed a mixture of modern technology, including VoIP communications, with old-fashioned automatic weapons to carry out frontal assaults on several targets, killing 170 persons. In the case of the Mumbai terrorist attack, there was some amount of intelligence, though not specific, about a possible attack on targets in Mumbai. Absence of specific inputs or possible details on how the attack would be carried out, however, made it difficult to take adequate defensive measures. It is hard to convey to those not directly involved in the events surrounding 26/11 that it was hardly a question of connecting the dots, but of dealing with an attack of an entirely different character. Despite the kind of criticism often leveled against intelligence agencies, I would like to stress that making sense of developing situations whose basic outlines are only beginning to take shape is something that will always require more and better intelligence. The new intelligence structures that have come up of late are intended to finesse some of the crucial aspects of intelligence production and analysis. The Multi-Agency Center in India, the Joint Terrorism and Analysis Center in the UK, the National Counterterrorism Center in the US have been set up to deal with the newer threats such as domestic and transnational terrorism by homogenizing systems and the databases of different agencies. I now come to my conclusion. My effort has been to try and provide you with an insight into the role of intelligence in matters concerning national security. Over the years, techniques of intelligence collection, assessment, and analysis have all undergone fundamental changes. But the need for intelligence has remained constant, as I said at the beginning. This remains the case even as the ways in which nations pursue their interests have changed or are changing. One change, not directly linked to the craft of intelligence, but to the atmospherics surrounding intelligence, is that intelligence is no longer a cloistered science. It has indeed come out into the open. Intelligence is thus the subject of even greater public scrutiny today. Consequently, there is now openly voiced skepticism and concern about the methodologies, apart from the value of intelligence and the nature of intelligence functioning. It is hence useful for those in authority, the educated elite, those in the various professions, academia, students and members of the media to realize the usefulness and utility of intelligence and how specific activities of intelligence agencies are crucial to sustain the nation state. A great deal of intelligence activity will necessarily have to remain secret, for this is fundamental to the craft of intelligence. Secrecy is central to the success of many intelligence operations. too much of intrusiveness under the garb of public scrutiny could prove to be self-defeating. Fortunately, after a period when there was widespread skepticism about the need for intelligence and the irrelevance of intelligence agencies, people are coming to terms with the reality that intelligence is a vital component in maintaining security. There is increasing realization today that security risks far from diminishing, are actually increasing, thus adding value attached to intelligence. I would further add that in a digitally enabled era, there is need for all citizens to comprehend and understand the evolution of the world of big data and the scope this provides for multiple forms of analysis which are very largely benign. The idea of intelligence